mission, should you choose to accept it.
It's a quest. It's a quest for fun.
Well, The Rock says, why don't we just cut right to the chase?
Okay, now he wants to get together. Well, he wants to talk.
I want you to do me a favor. I want you to tell all your friends about me.
It's showtime, folks!
What are you?
I'm...
Greetings and salutations. Welcome to And I Quote, the weekly show where we introduce you to content creators of all shapes and sizes. Join us from any and all corners of the nerd universe, and we take your questions. I am your host, Ryan, and our guest this week is crime fiction writer John L. French. John, welcome to the program. How are you?
Oh, good, Ryan. Thanks. How you doing?
Doing well, doing well. Thank you so much for being with us. Now, if you have any questions for John L. French as we go throughout the course of this show, let us know in the live chat. Let us know in the comments. Our producer is going to be monitoring it as we go throughout the course of the show. Remember, you're driving this thing. We're just along for the ride. But in the meantime, to kick things off here, John, what would you say were some of your favorite books or writers growing up?
Okay. Growing up, well, my first comic books first. Superman, Batman. I was mostly a DC guy because that's what I was exposed to. I remember my first Marvel comic. I read at a friend's house. I really didn't understand it because at the time the comics I were reading were done in one, and this was a Marvel comic. So you came in the middle and it ended before the story did. I really didn't read books until I got into high school. I went to a small school, and the readers there exposed us to a wide variety of authors and genres. The first book of stories had Arthur C. Clarke, Arthur Conan Doyle, Ray Bradbury, along with some of the classics. And what the teachers did throughout was they had this scholastic book service, and we would pick one book that we agreed on that we would read, and that would be the lesson. But we could also buy other books, and that exposed me to writers, again, Ray Bradbury, Agatha Christie. In fact, one of my English teachers was a big fan of Ray Bradbury, and when Fahrenheit 451 came on television, it was a movie, that was our homework that night. We had to watch Fahrenheit 451, and we were going to discuss it the next day. And the next day we found out she was very disappointed in that they didn't have the mechanical hounds that hunted people down. But, from there on in, I started discovering other writers like, I went from Agatha Christie to Raymond Chandler and to Dashiell Hammett. So my primary focus was on crime fiction. And also thanks to Bradbury, I read a lot of science fiction. So yeah, I was a genre reader from way back.
All right. A lot of different ways, a lot of different genres and different things to read. I completely understand that. When did you yourself decide to become a writer? Okay.
I had been working, I'm a retired crime scene investigator with the Baltimore City Police Department. And I'd been working for them for several years, and I had met a couple of writers, as friends. The main one of which was a gentleman named C.J. Henderson, who unfortunately passed in 2014. But he was the first writer I felt I liked enough to actually write and tell him how much I liked his work. And I wrote to him through a magazine called Hard Boiled, and it was called Detective Story Magazines at the time. And it was passed on, and he wrote back, and we became friends. His exact words were, when finding out that I was a crime scene investigator, was, I could use a man like you, because he wrote Hard Boiled detective fiction. So, I got involved with him and other things, and then just started writing my own. I came up with what I thought was a great ending for a mystery story. And having the ending, I sat down and wrote it. And to my surprise, it was published in Hard Boiled magazine. and I didn't really go into it full time until I started getting into anthologies and CJ told me, if you're going to write short stories, write them about the same character. And when you have enough stories, you've got a book, which is what I've basically been doing for my whole writing career. And I got into anthologies. I got into editing anthologies.
Mm-hmm.
And, so I wound up writing for small press magazines, creating characters like Frank Devlin, the Devil of Harbor City, the Gray Monk, who was my first attempt to emulate the Shadow. And, and then Bianca, I was asked to write a short story for a H.P. Lovecraft, Lovecraft Mythos collection. And that was going to be called Eldritch Blue. And the idea was it was going to combine sex and the mythos. And I wrote a story about, sex in its biologically intended form as reproduction. And I created a Baltimore City police detective named Bianca Jones. And she became a monster hunter. And even though the story wasn't published in that anthology, they held it over for something else that never came to fruition. I kept writing stories about Bianca Jones, and now I've got 5 Bianca Jones books out and another one coming this summer. So, and ever since I retired, I've been writing more and more with, several books coming out since the great unpleasantness of 2020.
Yeah, of course. Yes, of course. And congratulations on that. Oh my gosh, that's incredible. That series featuring Bianca Jones and all the things that character has done. Now, you mentioned a character by the name of the Shadow a moment ago. For you who may be watching or listening to this, can you tell us, just a little bit of an idea, who exactly is the Shadow and how long has that character been around?
The character of the Shadow has been around since early radio days. At first, he was a narrator of stories much like Alfred Hitchcock was or Rod Serling was on television.
Mm-hmm.
And in Street and Smith was the company that did the radio broadcast. Mm-hmm. And they were concerned because at the time they weren't sure if radio characters could be copyrighted. I know there were problems like that in the comic strips before that was determined, with the same character appearing in different newspapers written by different people. So what they did was they got a hold of a writer named Walter Gibson, mm-hmm. and said, "Here's the cover from one of our magazines. Well, here's a proposed cover from one of our magazines. Take the cover, write a story based on the cover, and throw in a character called the Shadow." And Gibson created this spooky crime-fighting character who blended into the darkness and doled out justice when the law fails. Nobody was sure whether he was a good guy or a bad guy who wanted to take out the other bad guys. And, so he became the prototype of all the other vigilantes. I mean, there was Zorro, and then there was the Shadow. Mm-hmm. And I won't get into the whole controversy, but it is said that Bob Kane was greatly influenced by the Shadow when he created Batman. And if you think about it, Batman is the Shadow, only Batman he no longer uses 45 caliber automatics, semi-automatics to take out the bad guys. And the Shadow was so popular, he went from a monthly magazine to a bi-monthly magazine, and lasted until well into and slightly past the World War II. Mm-hmm. And a variety of writers wrote the Shadow, but Walter Gibson, under the name Maxwell Grant, was the primary writer. And the Shadow has been in movies. He's been in comic books, and he's just one of those characters who won't go away. And I was greatly influenced by the Shadow because my father and I used to listen to the radio program when they rebrand. Because my father grew up in the radio era. He
Sure.
grew up listening to the Green Hornet, the Shadow, Basil Rathbone, and Nigel Bruce as
Yeah.
Holmes and Watson.
Yeah.
And we would listen to it. And one day he brought me home a battered paperback book. I don't know where he got it, but it was The Shadow Return of the Shadow by Walter Gibson. And I read that thing to death. And then they started republishing the novels as paperbacks, and I read them. So I was greatly influenced by the Shadow. And another influence in my writing was a pulp writer named Carol John Daly, who was the creator of the hard-boiled detective genre with his character Race Williams. I mean, in his first story, Race Williams goes up against the Klan, and you can't get more hard-boiled than that. And he was essentially a troubleshooter. There were people in trouble, and he shot the ones causing the trouble. And then based on that, I started writing for Tom Johnson's small press magazines, and I created a character called he was basically called the Devil of Harbor City, which emulated Daly's other character, Satan Hall. And Harbor City was my version of Baltimore, and Frank Devlin was a cop who reported directly to the commissioner, and whose job was to wipe out the gangs, whatever it took. And I think one of my lines in there is, well, should I hide in the shadows or dress like a bat? And the commissioner goes, well, criminals are a superstitious lot, but I'd rather have them be afraid of a crazy cop with a license to kill. And so that's no forensic science in that. That's just pure slam bang rock'em sock'em action, as CJ described it. But my first character was a private detective who was formerly a crime scene investigator, and again, that was, if you read that, you'll see the Raymond Chandler influence in me.
There you go. Wow, that is simply incredible. Thank you for sharing that with us. Once again, we're talking with crime fiction writer John L. French here on And I Quote. Make sure you're sharing this episode with all 200 of your closest friends. They're going to like the way they look after watching or listening to this. I guarantee it. If you have any questions for John L. French during the course of this program, let us know in the live chat. Let us know in the comments. We want to hear from you. So make sure you feel free to do so. Great stuff, man. I'm telling you, I look forward to learning more and more about this character known as the Shadow, because I'm a Shadow fan myself. Now, granted, I haven't learned everything because it's a lot of history. Let's be honest. I got a few books here and there. I got a graded comic from 1973's The Shadow #1 from DC, which was by Kaluta and Denny O'Neil. Have it here. It's a 9.6 graded from CBCS, I believe. So happy to own that because the Shadow is just a fascinating character. So feel free to look up the Shadow, ladies and gentlemen, because it's one heck of a lot of people have come through the doors and writing that character. There have been a lot of different iterations of the character. A lot of things have been switched up from here to there about his mythology. Where does he come from? What his deal is? Where is he going in the future and all that jazz. So, the weed of crime bears bitter fruit. Crime does not pay. Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of man? The Shadow knows. I mean, it's so catchy, that sort of stuff. It really is. So, John, what would you say are some of the biggest rewards about being a writer? What do you think?
Well, as you know, I don't know about Brandon Sanderson or Stephen King, but my rewards are not financial. I mean, I make money on my books. I make money selling my books at conventions, but primarily what I like is when I sell, somebody buys one of my books. Mm-hmm. And later on comes back and tells me, oh, I really like this book. What do you have like it? It's the interaction with the fans, and they tell me what they like, and sometimes they tell me what they don't like. And it's the idea of I'm creating a world that someone else enjoys. and sometimes it has an unusual effect. In my book, The Devil of Harbor City, Frank Devlin's tagline is, "Are you ready to pay for your sins?" And sometimes when somebody bought the book, I would write, if they wanted it inscribed, I'd write their name and I write, "Remember, always pay for your sins." And I'd say that'll make sense once you read the book.
Right.
And I was at a convention, and a young woman bought the book, and about 15, 20 minutes later, she came back and she said, I just read what you wrote in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to tell you, that hit home, because I stole some money from my sister, a good bit of money, and I've been trying to pay it back. And this idea of always pay for your sins really hit home with me. And now I'm going to try even harder to pay her back every penny I took from her. So, I mean, you get something like that as an author, it's kind of like, okay, well, my existence has been justified, But it's the idea of creating worlds, and like I said, creating worlds and sharing them with others. And when people come up to you and say, "Do you have another book about Bianca Jones, or when's the sequel to this book coming out," and all that, that kind of gives you a good feeling.
Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness! Wow.
Plus, it's been meeting all the other authors, because we're kind of a close knit group. And you meet with other authors, you share ideas, you help them with their books, they help them with yours.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you are of the belief that a rising tide lifts all ships.
Right. You get the occasional idiot who, he feels like if somebody's buying one of your books, it's taken away from him.
Mm-hmm.
But if the people I know we'll be like, I'll have a table, and there'll be another writer next to me, and I'll push their book and they'll push mine. I remember it was last October, I was down in Virginia at a library book festival.
Oh, nice.
And these were people, I'm between two writers.
Mm-hmm.
We've never met. And it's sort of like somebody will come to their table, and it's sort of like, well, what do you write? What do you write? He said, well, she'll say, I write fantasy. Well, do you write in this? Oh, no, but John over here has, science fiction and crime. And the woman next to him, she writes historical romance. And they're all good books. We've never read each other's books, but, we're writers. They have to be good books. So it's a community. And granted, I want to sell my book, but if I can't sell my book, why don't you, if you don't want to buy my book, why don't you try their book? You might like them better.
Yeah. There you go. I can totally see that. So yeah, rising tide lifts all ships. If you share someone's social media feed, that has a link to their latest book, and then they share yours, it's a win-win.
Right.
So I totally agree with you on that. Very good stuff. On the other side of things, though, what would you say are some of the biggest challenges about being a writer?
Sitting down to write. It's that's my biggest problem. Once I sit at the computer and get started, I'm good for 500, 1,000, maybe 1,500 words if I'm lucky. But it's that it's me getting my butt in the chair so that I can start writing, and some of the, but as far as writing, it's writing what you want, but at the same time, writing what people want to read. If you write a story and nobody wants to read it, then you've essentially wasted your time. Unless you're the type who, gets off on reading his own fiction over and over. That's it. And when I write the crime fiction, now I used to be, when I retired in 2019, so I used to be up on all the current forensic techniques. Mm-hmm. Now I have to do a little bit of research if I want to write crime stories in the 21st century, because I want to stay current. I still get some email, subscribe to some forensic emails and things like that. But you have to stay current, And if you're writing in other time periods or something like that, you have to make sure you do your research.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, a fellow writer, Patrick Thomas, and I we collaborate a lot, and he started this series called Agents of the Abyss, which takes all the public domain creatures and monsters and legends and puts them all in the same universe. So, and he asked me, well, if I would work with him to kick off the series with more and more. Initially he asked for some Sherlock Holmes stories set in that universe.
Yeah.
And then we started talking about Frankenstein and the Frankenstein monster. And the more we started talking, the more we realized we had a book there. So I did the first draft, and in order to do it right, I've read Mary Shelley's Frankenstein at least 3 or 4 times in the writing of the book, just to make sure I was getting everything right. We didn't go with the movies, we didn't go with the comics, although DC does a great Frankenstein. But we went with the original source, and then we put in all the stuff that Mary Shelley left out.
Oh.
Because if you've ever read the novel Frankenstein, it's all of it's told. Even the creature's story is told from the point of view of Victor Frankenstein,
right?
The creator.
Right, the creator.
And he's not what you'd call an objective witness, because as he's telling the story, he's the victim. He's the put upon one. It's all the creature's fault. Well, we didn't think so. So, and it's called Frankenstein Monsters of the Abyss because there's more than one monster in there, and it may not be who you think it is. And we get into what makes a monster. Do monsters have choice? If you have a choice to be a monster, can you choose not to be a monster? And it's told from the point of view of Victor. It's told from the point of the creature whom we give a name. It's told from the point of Victor's fiance, who's also his cousin. So, a point of view from Victor's best friend Henry, and from the omniscient narrator's point of view. And we use the old concept of using journals and letters and things like that. And it follows the creature. I don't want to call him the monster, but it follows the creature's point of view, his journey that as described more or less by Shelley, and Victor's journey from Switzerland, not Germany, folks. It was Switzerland. And from Switzerland to northern Italy, to England and Scotland, and even part of it even takes place in Ireland. And to the grand encounter between Victor and Elizabeth on their wedding night, and the creature, and what happens after that, and what you think may have happened. Well, we have a different idea of what happened. But it's Frankenstein, Agents of the Abyss, and Frankenstein, Monsters of the Abyss, and it kicks off Pat Thomas's Agents of the Abyss story series.
Another interesting world we'll have to dive into at some point or another. Once again, this is And I Quote, and we are joined by crime fiction writer John L. French. If you have any questions for him during any portion of this show, let us know in the live chat. Let us know in the comments. We would love to hear from you. Also, make sure you're sharing this with all 300 of your closest friends. They're going to like the way they look after watching or listening to this episode. I guarantee it. So any other special memories for you from being at conventions or other events, whether you're there as a vendor or whether you are there as an attendee?
Okay. As an attendee, usually these days, the only convention I attend as an attendee is the Baltimore Comic Con. And I've
in
had
October, yes.
Yes, I've had some good meetings with people. I've had really nice conversations with Howard Chaykin. Ostrander about a little bit of inside on the his Suicide Squad and his Spectre. I have met and learned some things from Greg Hildebrandt. And here's something for everybody.
Mhm.
In Peter Pan, the original, Tinkerbell is mentioned as having just come from an orgy. And I looked up, I'm thinking, well, maybe orgy meant something different when, J.M. Barrie was writing the book.
Right.
But no, orgy's been an orgy for a good while. So, that's a little something that most people don't realize. We were talking about how the publisher censored his illustrations of Peter Pan. Well, not Peter Pan, but Princess Tiger Lily.
Yes.
At first, he had her dressed in leaves,
Mm-hmm.
just leaves. He goes, all her other tribes people were dressing her basically in basic loincloths. So I put her in a loincloth with just a slight covering of leaves. And they said, no, you can't do that. So I put her in a bikini top. And we got that because that's the book I asked him to sign. And I had the original edition, which had her in the bikini top.
Huh.
And he goes, oh, you've got the first one. Because after the first edition, they made him put her in a buckskin dress. So Greg Hildebrandt and I had a nice chat for a while. So it's meeting these people that you've only you've really only whose works you've read. And at one signing, Neil Gaiman, I asked Neil Gaiman to sign his chapbook, Snow Apple Glass.
Oh.
And he took the time to tell me the story of how he came to write that book.
Mm-hmm.
But as a writer, it's the community of writers. You get to see people that you haven't seen since the last convention, and for many of us, that last convention was 2 years ago. And it's meeting the fans, and it's generally just reuniting with people. Selling the books is fun, and trust me, I really love it when people buy my books. It is a great thrill for a writer when somebody hands over their cold hard cash for something you've created. But it's also fun, like doing the panels and meeting people. I got to meet Larry Niven, the great science fiction writer.
Oh, wow.
We were on a panel together. How cool was that? And as a reader of crime fiction, one of the first panels I was on, and this was as a forensic expert, not as a writer, because I wasn't a writer then. I got to sit next to James Ellroy, the bad boy of crime fiction. And I had a book, of course, as a fan, I had him sign my book, and he wrote, "Hail, mighty crime lab king. This book is a forensic a ballistic microscope from hell. James Ellroy." So it's little moments like that make a convention for you.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, man. Thanks for sharing that with us. Those are some really, definitely some really good memories for sure. What advice or tips would you give to aspiring writers out there?
Well, one of the cliches is write what you know.
Mm-hmm.
But if you do that, if you're a doctor, all you're going to do is write doctor stuff. If you are a garbage man, all you're going to do is write garbage stuff. But and I know garbage collectors do a lot of stuff other than that. So please don't complain. But
mm-hmm.
What I'm going to tell you is, don't write what you don't know. Getting back to the Frankenstein book, I had read Frankenstein, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, a long time ago. I wasn't going to try writing a new version until I read the book. And then I learned a lot of things. I relearned a lot of things I had forgotten and learned some things I never even knew. How is Victor going to, what is Vic, what is Victor going to do? How is he going to bring this creation to life? And well, one of the things Mary Shelley mentions is that Victor was a reader of the scientific philosophers such as Isaac Newton and others. Newton was an alchemist. He had done research on the elixir of life.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the things that fits in there. At first, and Victor being a scientist, I don't think he would have gone directly to trying to reanimate a dead body. No, he would have started small with smaller animals. And so I have him doing that, but where's he going to provide electricity? Well, Benjamin Franklin was alive at that time, and he created a battery. So the Franklin battery, so when before you start writing, now if it's, if you're a police officer and you're writing police officer stuff, you pretty much know what to write about. If you're a lawyer, you know the law stuff. But if you're trying to write, if you're not a doctor and you're writing you're going to write something which involves medical procedures and all that, read up on the procedure so you don't have doctors writing into you saying you're full of crap. I really wish the people who created CSI would have taken that advice.
Yeah, I could see that. Big franchise, whether it's the original, went over to Miami, then went over to New York, and then they went back, and then they went to Washington, D.C. for a brief 2-season run of CSI Cyber.
Yeah.
So.
Now, the other advice is write. If you're going to be a writer, write. You don't have to write every day. There are some days you don't feel like it. There are some days the muse is not talking to you. Actually, it's your characters who will talk to you. Once your characters start talking to you and tell you what they're going to do, you're a writer. Write. One thing somebody told me is, all right, if, it's sort of like, well, it takes so long. No, it doesn't. If you sit down and write 500 words a day, 500, 5 days a week, that's 2,500 words a week, or or 10,000 words a month. Right? Yeah. The math's right. So 10,000 words a month. If you do this for 6 months, you've got 60,000 words, and my friend, that is a book. So, just C.J. Henderson, I keep going back to him, he wrote his first novel on his lunch hours at work.
Wow.
I don't know how long it took him, but that's what he did. He would eat and he would write. And by just writing on his lunch hour, he got himself his first book. And if you're a short story writer, like I started out writing crime fiction. Then somebody came along and said, do you want to write a zombie story?
Mm-hmm.
And I knew just enough to say, yeah, I can write a zombie story. And then I went back and tried to figure out how to write a zombie story. But it turned out I actually wrote 2 of them, and they both wound up to be zombie crime stories. A lot of my stuff, a lot of my work, whatever it is, science fiction, fantasy, the crime seeps its way in there. And sometimes the people, the writers and the editors who knew me would come to me just because I was a crime writer and because I was a crime scene investigator and knew about this stuff. I was asked to write a police procedural for Mike McPhail's Defending the Future series. And my mouth talked before my brain thought. And I said, okay, I'll write you a locked airlock mystery. And then I had to figure out how to do that. And then Danielle Ackley McPhail, for her Badass Fairies series, asked me to write a fairy story about a SWAT team, which I did, but I set it in our world. and then with a BPD SWAT team, and then she turns around. She says, "No, I wanted a fairy SWAT team." Oh, so I took what was happening in this world, figured out what was happening in fairy, and wrote a companion story, which featured at the end a fairy SWAT team. So I write, and there is some crime. There are crimes to be solved in Frankenstein's Agents of the Abyss, because if the creature didn't do it, then who did?
Right, exactly. Could have been anybody. Yeah, really, really good stuff. Good advice for aspiring writers out there. Once again, we're talking with crime fiction writer John L. French here on And I Quote. Make sure you're sharing this with all 400 of your closest friends. They're going to like the way they look after watching or listening to this episode of And I Quote, I guarantee it. If you have any questions for John L. French, let us know in the comments. Let us know in the live chat. More than happy to hear from you as we go throughout the course of the program. Who would you say are some of your favorite writers now? And of those writers, who would you want to collaborate with in the future?
My favorite writers now. Well, let me mention my friends first. I don't because they're my friends. So by definition, they're my favorite writers. Patrick Thomas, who writes the wonderful Murphy's Law series.
Oh.
Murphy Law series is about a bar in Manhattan. It's owned by a leprechaun. Dionysus is one of the bartenders. Hercules is the bouncer. And because the leprechaun bought it with his pot of gold, rainbows lead people in trouble to the bar, and stuff happens. There's Russ Colchamaro. He writes a wonderful mix of hard-boiled and sci-fi stories. There's Danielle Ackley McPhail. She's a good writer. She's a much better editor, putting together anthologies of science fiction, fantasies, and lately of cryptid stories. There's of course James Chambers, who is an excellent writer. Of the ones I don't know, one of my favorite crime writers is Carol O'Connell, who writes about a New York City detective, Mallory, who is if she wasn't a cop, she might be a sociopathic killer. There's the one I've just discovered is Ben Aronovich, who writes the Rivers of London series, which are basically, it's told from the point of view of a police constable who gets involved, who turns out he has a taste for, he has a talent for magic, and he gets involved with the London's the unit of the London police that deals with magical and unusual crimes.
Oh, okay.
And given that I write the Bianca Jones series, you can tell why that's I tend toward that. I've another great writer is, I hope I say her name right, Shannon McGuire, who writes a variety of horror and cryptid stories. I first discovered her through a book called Dying with Her Cheer Pants On.
Oh, geez.
Which is basically Buffy the Vampire, but with cheerleaders.
Ooh, there you go. That's a story. I'm sure it's a lot better than watching the Fear the Cheer marathon on Lifetime.
Probably. And this is, but Go Fighting Pumpkins.
Oh, geez.
That's who they cheer for. And and then one of the best new science fiction writers out there is Neil Asher, who is remarkably innovative and writes about the polity, which is the thing that's basically what they call the United Worlds. And the basic premise is, some time ago, the war between artificial intelligence and human intelligence was fought. Humans didn't know it was going to be fought. the AI's won, and everybody's happier and much better because of it. You know, and old time, we're talking Ray Bradbury, Isaac Asimov, my favorite, Cordwainer Smith, who has to be read to be believed, and who has a literary descendant in Levi Tidhard, who is a Israeli science fiction fantasy writer, and who's so far my favorite book of his has nothing to do with science fiction or fantasy. It's about a nun who loves to play poker and gets involved in a World Series of Poker type poker game in order to save the convent.
Wow. Now that is okay. I want to read that story.
Yeah, it's called The Big Blind.
The Big Blind. Okay,
Yes.
got it.
Yes, so it's a wonderful book.
The Big Blind. So I definitely got to look this up on Amazon. Goodness gracious. And what was the individual who wrote that?
Levi, Lavie, I think.
Okay.
Tidhar, Tidhar.
Tidhar. Okay. All right. Got it. The Big Blind. Ooh, I like poker type, like, gambling type stories where you have to put everything on the line, or you're trying to do it to help somebody or whatever. In this case, this character is trying to save their convent respectively. So
right.
The Big man. All right. I dig it. I like. Thanks for bringing that up.
And it's a thin volume. It's more novella length than novel length, but it has if you've ever watched the World Series of Poker,
which my brothers have,
I used to watch it, but it has that kind of excitement because, you never know, and I'm not going to give it away. You never know who's going to win the tournament.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Everything can change on the flip of a card.
Right.
So whether it's the turn, whether it's the river, when we're talking, by the way, those are poker terms, just so the person who's watching or listening is, I believe it's the turn, the river, and then what's the third one?
There's the flop, the turn, and
the flop, the turn, and the river. There you go.
Yeah, the flop, the turn, and the river.
Thank you. Just making sure, because I remember hearing those when I was a bit younger, when my brothers were fans of that stuff. So.
I did actually write my own poker story.
Did you?
I was asked to write a story for an anthology called Signed in Blood. Which basically was a collection of stories about deals with the devil.
Hell, playing poker and laying
and I'm thinking, all right, let's have it a literal deal. And I created a character named Simon Toombs, who is a gentleman adventurer with a taste for magic, and he eventually picks up a blonde woman who is also a demon from hell as an assistant.
And I believe you're talking about this. Just to give everyone a bit of context here, the image we have here on screen is written by the one and only John L. French, and it is called specifically The Magic of Simon Toombs. So that was going to be my next question. What exactly is the magic of Simon Toombs, and how did this all come about?
Well, this is how it came about. Was, like I said, I needed this character. I needed a reason for somebody to be playing poker with a demon. And Simon, it's basically a literal deal with the devil where human souls are at stake.
Ooh.
Simon's stake is a secret this demon desperately wants. Mm-hmm. And in exchange, he wants the IOUs that people have signed for him. Mm-hmm. Because let's face it, there is a big difference between I pledge myself to pay you back to then I pledge myself to pay you back. That little gap between the M and the S is all the difference it takes. So Simon came along like that. And another thing is that there was supposed to be an anthology about fairy tales. And it wasn't a retelling of it was a retelling of the fairy tales. And Simon winds up in a fairy tale, but in real life and all this. And the anthology never came out, but I did do the story. So there's a series of stories. Simon, it's a series of stories about Simon. Somewhere along the line, he picks up this this escaped demon from hell who takes the form of a young blonde woman. And he decides not to send her back to hell, but figures if he can reform her, that would be a nice poke in the eye to the masters of the pit. And I come up with a way, which I won't give away because it's if you read a book of how Simon can how Simon gets some of his power. It's a fun book. In one story, I managed to reference both The Princess Bride and what's the other one? Oh yeah, Smokey and the Bandit.
10-4, good buddy.
That's right. Some of it's set in a lot of it's set in Baltimore. A couple stories are set in Ocean City, Maryland.
Hey, Eastern Shore, what's up, guys?
Because that is a fun place to write about.
Yes, it is.
In my upcoming book, the Bianca Jones book, The Last Monster, a significant story is set in Ocean City.
Ooh, that made this Marylander's heart soar. All right. I dig it, man. The Magic of Simon Toombs definitely sounds like a great story, great stuff with these characters. So make sure to check that out. Another one I want to bring up here for just a moment. You mentioned the Gray Monk.
Yes.
So how did this all come about, and what would be your elevator pitch for the Gray Monk?
All right. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. The Gray Monk is his agent. He lurks in the shadow, like all good vigilantes. He lurks in the shadows and meets out justice when the law fails. And as you can see, he, dark gray monk's robe allows him to blend into the darkness. He's definitely not Batman, as you can tell with the smoking 45s in his hand. Somebody once said, he looks like he might be in the Zen lotus position, but ready to spring out of that at any moment because of the guns.
That's a good point.
It was originally published by a Wildcat Press, and when Wildcat Press left, when they stopped publishing, Padwolf Books picked it up.
Oh, nice.
And just so everybody knows, Ryan's copy is not all crumpled. That's part of the book design to make it look like, and it's part of the Padwolf Pulp imprint. And I can't give too much away because there's a big surprise in the second story. If you've read the book, you know what it is. Again, part of it gets into a philosophical discussion of, the mercy of God versus the justice of God. How can God be all merciful and all just at the same time? And that's one of the things the Gray Monk has to think about.
There you go. I look at this cover here with the Gray Monk written by you, of course. I'm getting a little bit, just because it's really hot right now. It's been on the air for a couple of weeks now, and also it's a character that's been around for a long, long time. Gets me a little bit of Moon Knight vibes.
I do like the Moon. I do like Moon Knight right now. I get a variety of comics from Collector's Corner in Parkville.
Hey, hashtag support your local comic shops, ladies and gentlemen.
Right, and the only Marvel comic that I buy is the Gray Monk. I mean, sorry. It would be nice, wouldn't it?
That would be nice if it were turned into a comic book series, but you're referring to Moon Knight, right?
Moon Knight, yes.
Is Moon Knight.
He also works for God, but he works for a different God.
Different character, different setting.
Really, I think I was attracted to Moon Knight because, of the Shadow and them and Batman. But, while the Shadow, as you could tell, definitely has an influence on on my writing the Gray Monk.
Yes.
The Moon Knight came later.
Yeah.
The Moon Knight was from my interest in this, and there were a couple series a few years ago I really love his persona of Mr. Knight, where he basically wears a three-piece all white suit with a white hood,
With the suit,
and he assists the police in their investigations.
Mm-hmm. That's very true. That's one of the different looks of the
Yeah.
character. Yeah, I have a Moon Knight trade here in my collection. I haven't read it yet, but it's from the Marvel. I believe it's Marvel's Epic Collections. It's a thick book. It's called Moon Knight: Shadows of the Night.
Yeah.
So that's the volume that I have. Friends of mine told me I should read it. There's some good standalone stories in there, so you can learn more about the character and its mythology and things of that nature. So I look forward to reading that, as well as, the Gray Monk, of course. Don't get me wrong, but I think this is one of your more recent pieces of work. And once again, we're talking with crime fiction writer John L. French here on And I Quote. If you have any questions for him, let us know in the comments, let us know in the chat, and also make sure you're sharing this episode with all 500 of your closest friends. They're going to like the way they look after watching or listening to this episode, I guarantee it. So this one here is called Mortal Sins. So how did Mortal Sins come about, and what would be your elevator pitch?
Okay. Former crime scene investigator, former PI, now a forensic investigator for the Baltimore City State's Attorney's Office. Most of the stories are, as they would say, ripped from the headlines. My character, Matthew Grace, was the character in the first story I had published. The first book in the Matthew Grace case book is Past Sins, and in this book, and in Past Sins, Grace starts out as a relatively new crime scene investigator and working his first major case. About midway through the book, something happens, and he becomes a private eye. Now, I want to stress that I created Matthew Grace before the O.J. Simpson trial, before CSI, before all this, before the increased interest in forensic science. Right. I also want to point out that the forensic science in Past Sins is to procedure, unlike some of the other ones. And midway through the book, something happens. He becomes a private eye, and we go into his first major case as a private eye, and we basically watch him as toward the end he has to decide what kind of person he's going to be. And the ending of the book eventually led into Mortal Sins. Past Sins was one of my first books, and it took me a good long time before Matthew started talking to me again and telling me what he was doing in the state's attorney's office. And this gets into, this was written during the pandemic. And all the social unrest that was going on, a lot of it caused by police actions or inactions, and people getting hurt and killed by the police, and the civil disturbances that followed. Baltimore had its own civil disturbances with an in custody death about in 2015. That is reflected in Mortal Sins. Mortal Sins takes place a few years after Baltimore had my version of Baltimore had had an in custody death with its resulting civil disturbances, and a lot of the stories directly reflect what basically not reflect, but are as a result of what happened.
Okay.
And gotcha. Grace finds himself at odds with not with his immediate boss, whom he knows from being a private eye, but with the Baltimore City State's Attorney, who is not a reflection. I must say, the only thing that my Baltimore City State's Attorney and the current Baltimore City State's Attorney have in common is that they are both they are both controversial, and they are both female. But my state's attorney is not the current Baltimore City State's Attorney. Let me just put that out there.
Right, right. Yeah, bit of a different story there. Absolutely. All right. Well, make sure if you are watching or listening to this to check out these fantastic sounding books. Some of these are, great stories featuring very compelling characters. So make sure you check that out. I want to let you know that this episode of And I Quote, and every episode of And I Quote, I should say, is indeed powered by Poddex. Now, Poddex are the hottest new tool for podcasters looking to have more meaningful conversations or simply gamify their podcast. Simply shuffle up the cards. You ask a question, you let the content roll. Get yours today at poddex.com and use the promo code Ryan10. Again, that is Ryan10, RYAN10, to get 10% off your order. You're not going to miss out on that opportunity, powered by Poddex. First things first, what's something that you've never been able to do well, John?
Never been able to do well.
Could be anything.
I think swim.
Okay.
I don't so much swim as I can float, but otherwise I sink.
Okay. All right. No worries. Yeah. Hey, no worries. Just throwing out the question. What is the funniest or maybe most disappointing or maybe even weirdest text message that you have ever received?
I can't exactly quote the thing, but for a while I was in I guess you call it a text group.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And
a group message.
A group message on text with it appeared to be everyone else. I don't know how they got my number, but it seemed like everyone else was a teenage girl.
Oh, geez.
And so I'm getting all these kind of weird messages.
Ugh.
And every once in a while I go, oh, by the way, I don't know where you got my number, but I don't think you mean to be texting this to me. Now, there wasn't anything improper sent, but the conversation just seemed like I was somehow in the middle of a conversation between teenage girls.
Ooh, that could be a bit awkward at times.
Yes. Or a good prompt for a story.
Well, yes. I mean, yes. If you want to use it as a prompt for an upcoming story or whatever it may be, that's up to you. But yeah, that's a bit of a strange group text, I'll say. What makes you feel old?
The mirror. I'll go back to the first time I felt old.
Okay.
I was married.
Mm-hmm.
I bought a house.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm out in the backyard and I see some neighborhood kids and I just go, hi, I'm John. I just moved in. They said, oh, hi. And then later, about 15 minutes later, Mr. John, can we ask you a question? Mr. John. And after I got over that, it was quite a few years later. I'm talking to two people in the crime lab. One is about my age and one is somewhat younger. And we're talking about DVD sets. The fact that I have DVD sets automatically ages me. But I mentioned to him that I had the Emma Peel. I had the complete Emma Peel Avengers DVD set.
Oh, okay.
And this one guy goes, oh, that's neat. And the other guy said, who's Emma Peel? Yeah. Well, and we both felt sorry for him because he didn't know who we were talking about. But, and then again at work, when I realized that the people we had just hired had not been alive when I started in the crime lab.
Oh, I see.
And then it kind of, look, people who I testified against and who were put in jail for 20 years are out now. So things like that. After a while, you just kind of hit a point where you go, all right, I'm this age. I'm going to enjoy this age, and I'm gonna stop worrying about getting older because one day I won't be getting older, and then I'll miss being old.
Yeah, that's like, I could see that. My goodness gracious. Wow. People in the crime lab younger than us, or whatever the case may be. Age is, some people would say age is just a number, but then again, some people may disagree with that, but I'll leave that up to you. So, who would you most like to sit next to on a 10-hour flight and why?
Okay. First of all, my wife. But if she wasn't with me, trying to think, and it was a relative stranger. I mean, like I would love to sit sit on a 10-hour flight next to one of my friends or something like that. But if it had to be somebody, I think it would be the first name that comes to mind is Neil Gaiman, because the man's got such wonderful stories.
Sandman.
The Sandman, yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And like I said, I've met him a couple times in signing, and he seems like a very nice person.
Okay.
And for those of you who know what we're talking about as far as the Sandman graphic novels, if you haven't picked up the audio version of the audio books, please do so. It is a whole new level of creepy, but in a good. And I'm looking forward to the Netflix series.
Oh.
And I saw a video of Neil Gaiman going on to the set of the Sandman the first time, and he turned into a total fanboy. Oh my God, I can't believe it looks this, like that. So, yeah, I think Neil Gaiman.
Okay. All right. There's another title for you who may be interested in reading more about comics or books in general. The Sandman by Neil Gaiman. Feel free to look it up. And hey, you may find it at your local comic shop. You never know.
Collector's Corner in Parkville.
There you go. Anything is possible. # support your LCS, ladies and gentlemen. What things do you do every day that you wish could be automated?
That's a good question, because I really don't know. I wish I didn't have to. I shave every day, but I wish I didn't have to shave and still look like I did shave.
Yeah.
But with everything else, everything's pretty much is automated. All the stuff that I want automated is automated. Oh. You have to remember, I come from a generation where if you wanted to change channels, you had to get up and do it yourself.
Turn that dial, folks. Yeah.
Yeah. Or basically, my father's remote control was me or my sister.
There you go. Remote controls. That's hey, that's another thing. And yes, certain TVs and certain pieces of equipment still use remote controls. So please be responsible with them and don't break them. So I'm just throwing that out there as a free piece of advice. That's just something that came to mind. But goodness gracious. Well, thank you for answering those questions. And we want to take this opportunity to say thank you to John L. French, crime fiction writer, for joining us on this week's episode of And I Quote. We sincerely appreciate it, John. Now, where can the person watching or listening to this find you online and everything that you have coming up? What do you got?
Okay. You can find me online. I'm on Facebook under John French, and I have a writer's page, John L. French. You can contact me by email, jfrenchfam@aol.com. I do not have a web page. I know I should have one, but I haven't gotten around to it. You can follow me on BookBub. If there is, there are local conventions. If you're in the Baltimore area, the next thing I'll be to is the Free Comic Book Day at Collector's Corner in Parkville. And then I will be at the Balticon on Memorial Day weekend. That is held at the Renaissance Hotel in Baltimore's Inner Harbor. As already mentioned, my current books are Frankenstein, Monsters of the Abyss,
Ooh.
Mortal Sins, along with Danielle Ackley McPhail. I edited an anthology for eSpec's books called Devilish and Divine, in which every story features an angel, a demon, or sometimes both. And also for eSpec, under the imprint Systema Paradoxa, I have been writing cryptid novels, one of which is When the Moon Shines, a Prohibition-era story about Maryland's own cryptids, Snallygasters and Dwayyo. And later I did Chessie at Bay, which is basically the Chesapeake Bay Sea Creature Year 1. It explains how Chessie got to the Chesapeake Bay and why she stays. It also features Snallygasters, Dwayyo make an appearance, and so do Italian submarines. And that's basically my new stuff. Coming up is in winter of 2023 is Detectives of the Abyss, which features Sherlock Holmes and his goddaughter. And in summer of 2022, The Last Monster, the final Bianca Jones collection. And that pretty much covers it.
Wow. Well, congratulations on everything that you have done up to this point and everything you have coming up. John L. French, thank you so much for being with us. We truly, truly appreciate it. Once again, my name is Ryan. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at RyanRPM5. Excuse me. I do have a link tree that's up now. And by the way, all the links to where you can find John L. French as well as myself will be located in the description of this episode. So make sure you check that out as well. Want to let you guys know that if you're looking for some killer swag, you got to check out our friends at theradbear.com. You're looking for the best nerd brand for swagga. Check them out. They got shirts, hoodies, all kinds of stuff from your favorite fandoms, whether it's Power Rangers, whether it's anime, whether it's the never-ending story of the 1980s or any other fandom that you can possibly think of. They got it. Make sure you use the promo code RYAN10. That's RYAN 10. All one word for 10% off your order. Check out our good friends over at theradbear.com. Lots of things are coming up. They're going to be adding some new merch, new swagger in the next couple of weeks and months. So definitely check out their website and follow them all across platforms on social media. You're not going to want to miss out on that. Also, we have some future watch-alongs. Anniversaries are coming up. Check this out. Spider-Man and the Avengers are turning 20 and 10 this year. That is insane. Time flies when you are enjoying some of the best films of all time or some of the best films of their respective genres. Spider-Man 2002, very influential. Marvel's The Avengers, very influential with comic book movies as a whole moving forward. They are going to go down on May the 3rd for Spider-Man's 20th anniversary and on May 4th for the Avengers 10th anniversary. Those are going to go down on, I believe it's what do we have here? Tuesday and Wednesday. Tuesday, May the 3rd, Wednesday, May the 4th at 8 p.m. EST right here on Nerd Culture's Facebook, YouTube, everything that's going on. It's going to happen right here. So you're going to want to hit that like button, smash that notification bell so you're notified when new videos go up on our channel. You're not going to miss out on that. There will be special guests that will be joining us for these watch-alongs. The question is, who are those special guests? You're going to have to tune in to find out. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss out on that opportunity. Oh my gosh, so many wonderful things are coming up. So many great events. So many wonderful people are going to be joining us here on And I Quote. Remember, like I said, like, comment, share, subscribe, do all that stuff. And in the meantime, stay healthy, stay strong, stay safe. And also, life is better when reading. Take a look.
Famous Faces and Funnies in Melbourne, Florida is leading the way in pop culture fun. From comic books and graphic novels to Funko Pops and collector's items, Famous Faces and Funnies has it all. Rick Shea and the professional team at Famous Faces and Funnies are friendly and knowledgeable. Whether you're looking for toys, props, collector treasures, or a new comic book, Famous Faces and Funnies is your one-stop shop. To find Famous Faces and Funnies on Facebook and Twitter, just type at FFF Comics.
In the summer of 1953, private investigator Will Lucky Marks was working as the in-house private eye for Arcane Pacific Pictures. Trapped inside the studio with the killer, Lucky must find the killer before time runs out. Lot 28. Own it today. Available iTunes and Amazon.com.
Secrets, trust, worth. The bond between souls intertwined within otherworldly intrigue. Michaela J. brings forth the Elite Warrior series, a collection of dark fantasy romance novels Set in a twisted world where power lusts in the hearts of men, and devotion seduces the souls of women. Warrior's Secret. Warrior's Trust. And Warrior's Worth. Available now at authormichaelajade.com.